Welcome to On the Water and in the Field, Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program's news magazine show. I'm your host, Kimberly Barber. In today's show, we're going to get an update on our habitat and shellfish restoration efforts at Tiana Bayside facility. We'll then head out in the field to learn about an important project underway to help save Sag Pond. Then we'll check in with our fisheries team and learn about a new effort focused on the striped bass fishery. Next up, we'll check in with the East End Food Institute to learn more about the culinary potential of kelp. Finally, we'll get an update on our Back to the Bays initiative and look ahead at some exciting things in the works for next year. So hang on, and here we go. CCE Marine Program has been conducting a nearly $1 million effort funded with support from Southampton Town's Community Preservation Fund to expand shellfish and habitat restoration work and related stewardship and educational programming based out of Tiana Bayside facility here in Hampton Bays. Let's learn more about this impressive project. Cornell Marine Program has been operating out of Tiana Bayside facility since 2015. Councilperson John Bouvier explains how CCE Marine and Southampton Town started their partnership at the site.
I want to thank Councilman Bouvier. I'm going to turn things over to him and let him tell you a little bit more about this building and how it...
I didn't realize how much time has gone by, but I think it was back in 2015 or 16 when I just got into office, and I was standing over there. This building used to be a prison. It was a place where they would take disorderly people and put them in there for transport in the 60s and 70s and 80s. John Irwin, who's the facilities manager for the park, I said, what's going on with this building? We want to create this, use this beautiful place that we're all looking at, and we had a lot of water quality issues in mind and things that we wanted to work on, and it seemed like a good logical place to start. The building was there. It had water. It's sited across from the Tiana Oceanside Bay, the pavilion over there, and it just kind of made sense.
So through grant funding from the county and town, we were able to rehabilitate that building and get it in use for camps, all sorts of educational opportunity. The really nice thing here is that we had been running recreation programs for decades here, sailing programs and swimming. Having Cornell on site now kind of marries those programs together because people have been enjoying activities on the water, but maybe not always thinking about what was going on under the water. The importance of the stewardship of our waterways and bays, and also just learning about the plantings, which Cornell put in as part of the whole facility here, educational signage. Kids are able to see, what native beach grass does to help coastal resiliency. It's really kind of marrying like the recreational water aspects to the educational water aspects.
So I thought this was just a great way to start. We have the SPAT program and everything else here, but it's evolved over time into more and more. You have Chris Pickerel and Kim Tetrault and Kim Barber, who I'm talking to, who really worked hard to get a lot of things going here, from eelgrass to aquaculture, and that's a way to get people into the heritage of the marine heritage of the town. Aquaculture, I think, is a big future, and that's where we're headed.
The opportunity to expand upon our aquaculture activities and habitat restoration efforts was provided in 2021 with the award of a $579,000 grant from the Southampton Town Community Preservation Fund.
It was established in 1994, I believe, by Assemblyman Thiel. What it is a transfer fee that's paid by the buyer of a home. So every time there's a sale, they contribute 2.5% of that sale price, and that money goes into the CPF fund. We buy parks properties, we buy spaces for preservation, things that we want to preserve the character of the community, and Community Preservation Fund is really at the heart of the program itself. So we've had an opportunity to do a lot of things, and one of the things that we do is this program, among many other programs across the town that we fund through the CPF program.
The community engagement opportunities that we have at Tiana Bayside include lots of education for youth and adults of all ages. We also have citizen science projects that people can get involved with, gathering data on a lot of our local species. And one of the big things we do is habitat restoration and species restoration. So we have loads of volunteer opportunities that people can get involved with.
Cornell's really been able to expand their programming outward into the water with flupsies, growing shellfish here, which they hadn't really been able to do prior. They had done off-site, so now we'll sort of see the fruits of that labor in the years to come, as well as planting eelgrass out in the bay. One big concern over the past few years we've been reading in the newspapers is the decline in bay scallops in our waters. One really exciting part of this project is that Cornell has grown out the first sanctuary here at Tiana Bay and put thousands, hundreds of thousands of scallops in the water, and we're excited to see how, you know, that helps regenerate our scallop population here.
So we're here now in Southampton to try to bring back what used to be a pretty plentiful and productive bay scallop population. What I'm actually doing today is we have scallops that were spawned at our hatchery in Southold, and we put them out here just over 6 weeks ago, and we've been growing them from hatchery size to planting size this fall. So every 3 weeks I'm coming out here, I'm checking the gear, I'm cleaning it, we're taking shell height measurements, mortality measurements. We're also cutting stocking densities, allowing the scallops to grow better. So as they become bigger, they take up more space, so you constantly have to be cutting their stocking densities in half. And then we'll take those scallops and we'll add them to another 200,000 that we'll be bringing down here. And we'll be planting them at various locations around Southampton to replenish the wild populations that have been depleted over the years through the brown tide blooms. So the idea is, A, bring them back as a commercial and recreational fishery, and B, to help bring back that biodiversity that was lost when the bay scallops were extirpated from this area.
Bay scallops are not the only species of importance being grown at Tiana Bayside. Summer 2022 marked the first year that CCE was able to install and operate a remote setting tank to aid in the creation of spat-on-shell oysters. Millions of larvae produced in our hatchery in Southold were transported down to set on recycled oyster shells in this tank. The resulting spat-on-shell oysters were then utilized to form an oyster reef that will both help serve as beneficial habitat and help enhance local oyster populations. This project also supported the spawning and grow out of hard clams to aid in restoration efforts. These clams were seeded into the 5-acre sanctuary designated by the town trustees located right offshore the facility, where they joined the bay scallops, eelgrass, and spat-on-shell oysters, creating a multi-species back to the bay's stewardship site. This site will help continually improve water quality and environmental conditions while helping to contribute to the maritime-based economy of the region.
The reason people come here and buy here and live here is because of the beauty and the aesthetic of it. And if we lost our water, our waterways, our shellfish industries, everything, if we lost all that, we would lose that economy too. And we would lose small businesses, which are the root here of things that need to have a functional, viable part of the town to work in.
My favorite part about being the volunteer coordinator is that I just get to meet so many different people. We have really young kids come to our workshops, and you can see the lights turning on in their minds, and they really genuinely want to help make the world a better place. And we have, you know, loads of adults that are coming and just want to get involved in something. So we get to chit chat about life, and lots of people from the local area, so I get to hear a lot of the history of this area. And it's just really heartwarming and hopeful to see so many people that genuinely care about, you know, being stewards of the land and stewards of the sea.
I love the fact that when you come here, you'll find these excited little kids in the programs that Carolyn Monaco does with the kids, and they get all excited and they draw things, and it's obvious that they're learning something that they didn't know before, and taking ownership of this beautiful place that feeds us and raises them, and I'm hoping that'll continue in the future. I'm a member of the SPAT program, so over here where we grow our oysters, you'll have people come up and ask, what are you doing? And it's a great opportunity to talk about that. So outreach, I think, is really critical. It's a big part of what you do here, but you also show what's possible and how it's being done, from underwater to the beaches. And you know, Cornell to me has always been a super special place because you guys are very active and very practical in your approach, and I was really glad to see the partnership come about because of that.
Another thing I'm looking forward to going into the future is the expansion of the native plantings that they've started here at Tiana Bayside. We've already seen that be able to get reutilized in other facilities we have in the town, including Foster Memorial Beach out in Noyak. We were actually able to take seagrass and goldenrod and other indigenous plants and take them and replant them in another beach location, which is really took well there and is starting to regenerate their coastline and resiliency. So I think just the continuation of all those aspects is going to be really important into the future, not just for Tiana Bayside, but for all of our shorelines.
Thank you, Kristen, Councilman Bouvier, and everyone from Southampton Town who has supported us through the years and enabled the expansion and success of our efforts here at Tiana Bayside. Now let's head a little further east to Sagaponack to hear about the work our groundwater team is conducting in partnership with Peconic Land Trust to help save Sag Pond.
Almost instantaneously.
We are at Sagaponack Pond this morning. We're on a residential property with someone who is very supportive and has been letting us do some site characterization work on the property.
This is part of a site that's a bigger effort to look at groundwater impacts to embayments. Sagaponack is one of those embayments that we've been looking at throughout the South Fork mostly, that we want to characterize the groundwater inputs related to nutrients, specifically nitrogen, and how they can impact a small embayment, a relatively small embayment like Sagaponack that's not open all the time to the ocean, that builds up nutrients, that has harmful algal blooms and other stresses. So the work that we've been doing is to characterize that, identify hotspots, and then ultimately work towards a remedy.
This project got started in 2021. We met with the Peconic Land Trust and talked to them a little bit about our method for, as Ron described, characterizing groundwater and the pore water and the submarine groundwater discharge into water body. They were really interested in our methods, and we performed a survey of the entire pond really over the summer of 2021 and finding these areas where there's elevated groundwater seepage and elevated nitrogen concentrations. And then we started talking to some of the community members in the area about how we can move forward towards remediation, and that means moving inland onto some of the residential and agricultural properties and doing some site characterization work to figure out the best locations to provide treatment, such as using a permeable reactive barrier.
The Peconic Land Trust has been protecting land around Sag Pond since the late 80s. We worked closely with neighbors to purchase properties as they came up for sale. We also had donations of conservation easements on a variety of properties. So we've been very active and working with the community to preserve what we know and love. Given the problems that our coastal ponds have with nitrogen and other nutrients coming in through the groundwater, we've been working with Cornell Cooperative Extension to find sites where permeable reactive barriers could be effective in cleaning the water literally before it enters the pond.
I came on and started working at the Tiana Bay site and did some of my dissertation research there, and then that turned into a really successful CPF funded and community funded project where we installed a permeable reactive barrier behind a bulkhead, and we've been monitoring that since 2020, and we recently have been looking at those results, and that system is still performing really well. So we're really excited about the results that we're getting from that bulkhead permeable reactive barrier.
With any type of new technology, it's really important to test the assumptions made, and that's certainly the case with permeable reactive barriers, PRBs. So what is unique about this work with Cornell is really looking for sites where these technologies can be tested and measured so that it can be perfected, not only around Sag Pond, but other coastal ponds in the area.
Just to take a step back, we have probably 6 or 7 sites throughout Suffolk County that we're pursuing this type of work, everywhere from the Great South Bay to Peconic Bays, 3 Mile Harbor to Hog Creek in East Hampton, Sagaponack, Georgia Pond. So it's been largely, Hampton Bays is unique in that it actually has a treatment. We went through the whole sequence of everything. So that one is the first one that's the full package. All these other sites are in some phase of that. And Sagaponack is, we're getting into the piloting phase to actually start to put remedies in play. Sag Pond is impaired, stressed like many other water bodies, but there's great potential here to do something about it, and it's still healthy enough that it can be turned around, not only with our effort, but improving septic systems, controlling fertilizer use. It's a package to improve a water body.
Well, the promise of the PRBs is that we can actually make this water healthier and safer for people and for animals. There's a lot of activity here in the summers, people crabbing, but when those blue-green algal levels get high, they can't do that safely anymore. Losing the access to the water for fishing is a big deal. So that's what this is all about.
I think that's what's intriguing, that it's going to take decades to change everything else. Hopefully, we're wising up as a society. But this is a real thing you can do now, and it's kind of exciting about piloting, improving, developing, these methodologies. So.
What a great community-supported project and partnership with Peconic Land Trust we've been fortunate to forge in support of the health of Sag Pond. Looking forward to hearing more about the evolution of this project in the future. Moving on from Sag Pond on out to the ocean, we'll now check out what our fisheries team has been up to and find out why they've been chasing stripers all around Long Island.
Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program received a grant to study PCBs, also known as polychlorinated biphenyls, in the striped bass fishing industry from the Department of Environmental Conservation. The last studies were done back in the early 1990s.
Way back in the 80s or 90s, there was, concern about PCBs, and so a lot of these areas that we're, especially out west, have been closed, especially for commercial harvesting of striped bass, because of concerns of PCB contamination, obviously health concerns with eating fish that may be contaminated like that. So again, since things have been, we're hoping, cleaned up better, they're hoping that this study will show that, that concern isn't warranted anymore, and that, possibly there are some areas that could be opened up for commercial fishing. So knowing that we work a lot with the commercial fishing industry and the recreational fishing industry, they came to us with the idea where the DEC would be running the samples to test for these, but because of the stakeholders that we have in the fishing industry, they thought it would be a good idea to partner with us so that we would go and work with our constituents and go out and collect the striped bass samples with the industry, have their participation. And the way it works is that for the months basically from April until about October, November, we're collecting about 50 fish plus a month. For this year, there's 5 different zones around New York, around Long Island. Target is for us to collect 10 samples per month. So in addition to 10 representative samples in that commercial slot size, which is 26 inches to 38 inches. We're also trying to get 1 representative trophy size, which would be over 38 inches per month. So, the total amount of fish that we're collecting, maximum has been 55. This is also being looked at through the New York State Department of Health, because they would have the final say as far as, what would be appropriate levels, or if there are any contaminants, what's safe.
My role, I am the manager of this project, so I'm managing everybody that goes out with the fishermen, and I'm also managing all the tags, the sorting, and also getting it delivered to the DEC. Today I'm going to be having an employee of the DEC come, and he's going to take some fillets, some of the ancillary samples, anything that he can carry basically and keep cool, and he's going to bring those back up to New Paltz, where they're going to be doing all of the actual like chemistry and checking and biology work. Yeah, and we bring the fish back here and we dissect them, and we get a whole bunch of samples. For the PCB contaminants, that comes from the fillets of the fish. So we get both the left and right fillets, and then they're frozen in our freezers here. But because they want to take as many data points as possible, they're also having us take ancillary samples. So those would be our fin clips, otoliths, spleens, and stomachs also.
It would be interesting if this would be ongoing. I think, you know, the real litmus test is going to be, you know, what we see from this, and I think I know the fishermen have been pushing this, you know, for years, and I think just the fact that it is getting finally done, and that in the foreseeable future there will at least be some answers. So at least now we can say that yes, the PCB concentrations are better and we can possibly open up areas, or at least answer the question that, okay, maybe no, that there isn't, and you know, so maybe that will provide some avenues to where if they see maybe the levels have come down, but they just haven't reached the area where they're okay levels now, but maybe that could provide other funding or the need to, you know, continue this on a, you know, semi-regular basis every 2 years. Versus, you know, waiting, you know, 20 years to see if everything's cleared up again.
Hopefully all this great research will help efforts to understand any health implications of consuming striped bass. Thanks, Fisheries team, for all you're doing to help us understand these important issues. On the topic of edible options from the sea, we'll now check in to see what our local kelp industry is up to and what the latest is in trying to utilize local kelp as a food product.
The kelp study has come a long way on Long Island, and many growers, as well as Lazy Point Farms, have learned a lot about its complexity to grow and where to grow it. Lazy Point Farms was created to provide structural, educational, and logistical support to advance the future of sugar kelp on Long Island. In 2022, the stakeholders are bringing kelp to the next phase, which is what is its best use here on Long Island and beyond. The East End Food Institute has been partnering with Lazy Points for the last 3 years to help them find a good way to bring kelp to market.
They're exploring the viability of commercial kelp farming here off Long Island, and we've been helping in kind of part of that process to receive the kelp, process it into a number of different products, which are then being sampled by chefs and other interested folks in the community to see, you know, what are going to be the most popular uses for it.
So this was our 3rd year doing the kelp. The first year was very experimental. I had never worked with it before. Last year we got more familiar with it, and just the difference in the kelp from the 2 locations was quite different. One of the farms had very large, long leaves that were thick, and the other farm had a smaller leaf, a little more tender. So it was really interesting to work with the 2 different products. This year we came up with a few different products. We did a blanched flash frozen, we did a puree, and then actually even tried some pickling some of the stipes from the kelp. So it was kind of cool, you know, knowing that it's a new product, you know, we're just researching it, so it's just fun, you know. Some things worked, some things didn't work. So it's nice to be in the beginning of the program to really see, you know, the baby steps of it.
Some of the kelp had been cleaned prior to us receiving it. Some of the kelp was cut into strips. Some of the kelp was kept in whole blades as much as possible. And then the kelp was blanched, cooled, spun-dried, and then frozen. And then after it was frozen, it was then bagged, vacuum sealed, and frozen again. This is some of the kelp that was harvested in mastic. It's a 1 pound bag of the whole blades that we blanched and vacuum sealed and froze. Currently it's a very small scale project, and so there's very little risk. But yeah, as the project scales up, we want to be absolutely certain that this is totally safe for the consumer. The partnership with Lazy Point Farms is the only time during the year when we're processing kelp. And so it's, we've done it either April or May each year, kind of a one week project. This year there were actually 2 different sites where the kelp was harvested from, and each year we've done a little bit more in terms of poundage of kelp received. So we had some kelp that was harvested off of Montauk that was actually a baby kelp, so it didn't have any stipes attached to it, and it was kind of not as fully developed. And then the second project, we had kelp that was harvested in mastic, and that more developed, more mature kelp that had the stipes attached to it. And they also had the time and the infrastructure over there to kind of pre-wash, pre-clean some of the kelp before we received it. That certainly yielded better results. I'm really interested in how this project progresses. I think that kelp is an important part of the local marine ecosystem, and if it's a product that we're able to kind of cultivate and grow more of, it'll help keep the waters cleaner and also provide an off-season income for oyster farmers, which I think would be a great thing to help kind of maintain the financial sustainability for those folks that work so hard kind of growing their oysters during the other months.
I'd like to continue with the program next year and see where it goes. I know we're having, some testing places where to test it, so it's a different product, and see, each year, which is nice to see how we've taken steps to make the program grow, and hopefully it gets bigger again next year.
I think it will evolve. Yeah, I think that globally there is a lot of interest in seaweed consumption in various forms. And it's a very nutritious food from my understanding, and so I think there's really a lot of applications for it. In its raw form or in its minimally processed form, it's not that familiar to our palate here on Long Island because you don't see a lot of it out in the market, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for food producers that want to get creative to introduce it to more people.
We're excited to see continual progress in the establishment of a local kelp industry and integration of this sustainable ingredient into the culinary world. It's so great to have organizations like East End Food Institute working to figure out how to advance its uses. Now, before we wrap up this episode, let's get an update on what our Back to the Bays initiative has been up to this year.
Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program's Back to the Bays initiative had a busy and productive year. Much progress was made in scaling up efforts to connect our communities and businesses with ways to give back and get back to the bays. Among the highlights of 2022 was the establishment of a new Back to the Bays restoration and stewardship site on Shelter Island. A new tank was installed at Dickerson Creek, enabling us to conduct 2 rounds of remote oyster larvae setting, resulting in millions of spat-on shell oysters being produced. We were also able to add approximately 70,000 bay scallops to this new restoration site. In preparation of the continuation of this important work, we initiated a shell recycle program on the island, in which 8 restaurants are now participating in. Our partners over at Sylvester Manor have granted us space to hold on to all the shell until it's ready to be turned into oyster reefs next year. More on this effort to come in our next episode. To stay informed, we encourage you to check out our website at backtothebays.org and join our membership program and mailing list.
We're looking forward to more good things on the horizon, and of course, we'll feature them in future episodes of our show. That does it for today, though, so see you next time on the water and in the field.